I was passing the lasagna when my sister-in-law leaned in and asked if she could borrow my wedding dress, just for a day. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. And that night, I started losing my place in my own marriage, one passive-aggressive text at a time. You won't believe how far they went, and what I finally said. It started with lasagna, a quiet Tuesday evening, warm lighting, low voices in the kitchen, the clink of forks on ceramic. We were at Dan's mom's house, our third family dinner since the wedding 6 months ago. I brought a bottle of Merlot and a polite smile. I was still learning how to breathe in this space, where jokes came with undercurrents and warmth had the texture of wool, thick, scratchy, too much. Darla, Dan's sister, waited until dessert to ask. She reached across the table, touched my hand like she was about to share a secret, and said, "Hey, I was wondering, would you mind if I borrowed your wedding dress, just for a day, for the vow renewal next month?" I laughed. Reflex, not humor. "You're serious?" She smiled, eyes bright with that practiced sincerity that made me feel like I was already cornered. "It's just one day. I'm not asking you to give it away. It would mean so much." Dan shifted in his seat beside me, not saying a word. I told her I'd think about it. I didn't need to think about it. The dress had lived in the back of our closet since the honeymoon, carefully zipped in its bag, wrapped in tissue. I'd only opened it once since, on a rainy Sunday when Dan was out just to hold it. The memory of that morning was stitched into the lace, how my hands shook when I put it on, how Dan teared up seeing me, how we danced in the kitchen afterward in our socks, too giddy to care that we hadn't even left for the venue yet. And now, she wanted to slide into it. Like it was a rental, like it wasn't part of my story. The next morning, the group chat lit up. "Can't believe you wouldn't help your own family," from Dan's mom. "It's not like you're using it," from a cousin I've met twice. A gif of a disappointed face from Darla herself. Dan just scrolled through the messages, then muttered, "They mean well." By the weekend, the tone had shifted. Darla messaged me privately, long paragraphs. "I know you're still adjusting to being part of this family, but we really value generosity here." She included a photo of her and her husband captioned, "Renewing our love just like you and Dan. Isn't that beautiful?" I didn't answer. Then the calls started. From Dan's mom, his aunt, his grandmother, who I'd only met at the wedding. They didn't ask. They assumed. "So generous of you, dear. That's what family's about." Dan stood behind me during one of the calls, saying nothing. I asked him later, "Do you agree with them?" He looked at the floor and said, "It's just a dress." I stood in the closet the next day, fingers on the zipper of the garment bag. I felt the silence of the house around me, the absence of him standing with me. I unzipped it, lifted the bodice gently. The silk was cooler than I remembered. It still smelled faintly of peonies. Of that day. My phone buzzed. Group chat. A new message from Dan's mom. "Sometimes people show who they really are." I stared at the dress, my heart beating in my throat. Then I recorded a voice message. Calm, deliberate, no room for misinterpretation. "No means no. I won't lend my dress. Please respect that. This is not up for discussion." I hit send. Silence for a few minutes. Then one by one, I watched the scene checkmarks appear. No one replied. I stood there holding the dress like armor, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something strange. Freedom. The group chat went dead after my voice message. No heart reacts. No passive-aggressive follow-ups. Just silence. Like they'd all collectively sucked in a breath and didn't know what to do next. But that quiet didn't feel like peace. It felt like the moment before a storm hits. Dan came home from work that night unusually quiet. He didn't kiss me hello, just dropped his keys on the counter and hovered in the kitchen like he was waiting for something. Finally, he said, "You really could have handled it more gently." I blinked. "Gently? She's sensitive. She asked for my wedding dress, Dan." "Sensitive doesn't mean entitled." He rubbed his temples. "Mom said you embarrassed her. Said she had to calm Darla down after she cried for an hour." I almost laughed, but I didn't, because the ache in my chest had already replaced the anger. Over the next few days, the quiet turned into whispers. Not direct ones, of course. Just background noise, muted pings from the family chat, passive posts on Facebook. Dan's mom uploaded an old photo of Darla in white, captioned, "Some people are born to wear grace." His aunt commented a rose emoji. Dan liked it. I started noticing what wasn't being said. I wasn't tagged. My name didn't come up in dinner invites. There were plans we weren't part of anymore. On Friday, Dan's mom called. I answered on instinct. She sighed before she spoke. "I didn't raise my son to marry someone so hard." I said nothing. Just let the words hang there. "She's your sister now," she added. "I thought you'd understand what that means." I hung up. Later that night, Dan sat next to me on the couch and pulled out his phone. Maybe just for the photos. "You wouldn't even have to dry clean it." I stared at him. That dress, my dress, was the one thing I'd truly chosen for myself. My mother and I had gone shopping together. She'd cried when I stepped out of the fitting room in it. She died 4 months later. And here was Dan, bargaining it away like a spare set of towels. I got up without a word and went to the bedroom, opened the closet, slid the dress out and stood holding it like something fragile. A photo slipped out from between the folds, a picture of us on the balcony after the ceremony. My eyes squinted from sunlight, Dan beaming beside me. I hadn't seen it in months. It hit me then. I wasn't being asked for a favor. I was being tested. I folded the photo and slipped it into my pocket. Then I gently zipped the dress back into its bag and hung it back, slower this time, like I was placing something sacred back on an altar. And that night, I slept in the guest room. The next morning, Dan noticed the empty side of our bed. He didn't say anything right away, just lingered in the doorway, eyes scanning the made-up guest bed like it was a crime scene. You really moved out over a dress? I didn't answer. I was brushing my hair, trying to keep my hand steady. My silence must have irritated him because his voice rose a notch. It's not even about the dress anymore, is it? He was right. It wasn't. But he didn't get to say that like he just solved some puzzle. I turned. No. It's about how quick you were to sell me out for family approval. It's about how fast they iced me out the moment I said no, and how you didn't stop them. Dan looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't. Just left the room. By noon, his mom had called again. Left a voicemail this time, her voice dripping with weary disappointment. You're tearing this family apart over a piece of fabric. Darla's been through so much, and this could have been a healing moment for her. Instead, you've made it all about yourself. There it was. Not can we talk? Not I understand this is difficult. Just, you're the problem. I didn't reply. I'd started cataloging their tactics like a forensic scientist. Guilt, isolation, reputation management. The holy trinity of passive-aggressive warfare. That night, I scrolled through our wedding photos. One in particular stopped me. Dan and I dancing, his hand resting on the small of my back, his eyes fixed on me like I was the only person in the world. I stared at that version of him, the one who had my back, who stood with me. I hadn't seen him in weeks. I closed the album and sat for a while, staring at the closet. I hadn't touched the dress again. I didn't need to. Just knowing it was there felt like an act of resistance, a reminder that some things, my things, weren't up for barter. I started noticing other details, the way Dan's phone buzzed more at night now, the hushed tones he used when he answered, walking into another room. Once I caught a glimpse of a message thread with Darla. All I saw before he flipped the screen away was, just get her to bring it. Or say we'll buy it, as if that would make it better. The silence from the family broke Sunday evening. A new text in the group chat, from Dan's mom. Family meeting Tuesday, 6 p.m. at our place. Everyone's expected. I showed Dan. He just said, guess we should go. We? I'm not going, I said. His face twitched. Confusion, then irritation. They want to work it out. No, they want to corner me. I'm not walking into a room where I'm the villain before I even open my mouth. He stood there like he was weighing options, like I was a negotiation point. I said, if you go without me, you're telling them they were right. He left the room without answering. Tuesday came. I stayed home. I made myself tea, left my phone face down on the table, and lit a candle just to remind myself that I still had a body and a space that belonged to me. Dan went. He didn't come back that night. I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of the front door unlocking. Dan came in quietly, like someone who knew he shouldn't be there. I didn't get out of bed, just listened as he shuffled around the kitchen, the soft thump of the fridge door, then silence. No footsteps toward the guest room, no check-in, just withdrawal, a slow retreat behind the walls we used to call home. The next morning I found him asleep on the couch, shoes still on, the throw blanket barely covering him. His phone was face down on the coffee table, a red light blinking. Probably his mother, or Darla, or the group chat. I stepped over him, grabbed my mug, and poured myself coffee like I had a guest who overstayed their welcome. He woke up just as I sat down, eyes puffy, hair a mess. We need to talk, he said. I sipped my coffee. Go ahead. The meeting. It wasn't what I expected. That made me laugh. Sharp and humorless. Let me guess. Intervention vibes? He winced. Kind of. They said you're not adjusting well, that you've never really made an effort. Because I wouldn't hand over my wedding dress like a free sample? He looked down. They think you're cold, unwilling to compromise. I waited. And you? Dan rubbed his face. I just think maybe you're taking it too personally. It's a family tradition thing. They want to include you. By erasing me? I said, quieter than I expected. He didn't answer. What did you say at the meeting? I asked, keeping my tone even. Dan hesitated. I said you've been under stress, that maybe you needed some time to come around. I sat back, blinked hard. So I'm unstable. That's your story? His silence felt like betrayal. I stood, walked to the closet and opened it. I stared at the dress. Still there, still untouched, still mine. Behind me, Dan's voice cracked. Darla said if she doesn't wear it, she might cancel the vow renewal. Mom's devastated. She already put down a deposit on the venue. I turned slowly. Then let her cancel it. Dan looked at me like I'd just spit in the soup. Why are you being so rigid about this? No, I said. Why are you so eager to give them pieces of me I haven't offered? There was no shouting, no big fight. Just a long, heavy silence while I picked up the dress bag and placed it on the bed. I didn't unzip it. I just looked at it like I was seeing it for the first time. The thing that had meant beginnings now marked the edge of something else, maybe an ending. Later that afternoon, I sat down with my laptop and drafted a message. To Dan's mom. Simple, unapologetic. I won't be attending any more family events until my boundaries are respected. I've said no. That's final. I paused before hitting send. Thought about adding something softer, a buffer. Then I didn't. No explanation. No cushioning. Just a line drawn in permanent ink. That night, I found Dan outside on the porch, legs stretched out, phone in hand. He looked up when he heard me. They're upset. Darla says you've changed. I didn't flinch. No, I'm just finally acting like myself. Dan looked away, then back. I don't think they're going to stop. I know, I said, and stepped back inside. But I already have. Dan didn't follow me inside. He stayed out on the porch long after the sun dipped below the trees, tapping endlessly at his phone, scrolling through reactions I couldn't see and no longer wanted to. When I glanced out an hour later, I saw him on a call, gesturing, pacing, eyes narrowed like he was explaining me away. I went back to folding laundry. It felt almost comically mundane, the way a life can keep moving while something inside you is already split in two. That night, we didn't speak. Again. The next morning, the fallout arrived on cue. Dan's cousin unfollowed me on Instagram. His aunt removed me from a recipe-sharing group I'd been added to after the wedding. Someone, I don't know who, shared a blurry picture of Darla crying at the kitchen table, holding a tissue like a grieving widow. The caption said, "Some people forget that family is about love, not possession." Dan didn't say a word about it, but he left his phone open on the coffee table that night, screen glowing bright with notifications. I didn't touch it. I didn't have to. The implication was clear. Look what you've caused. The next few days were quiet, but not peaceful. Everything was a performance now. Movements choreographed around avoidance. He took his dinner in the living room. I started locking the bathroom door even when I showered. Then came the envelope. No stamp, no name. Just a thick white envelope slipped through the mail slot with my first name in cursive. Inside were printed photos, pictures from our wedding, me in the dress, us laughing, a shot of me alone, smiling at the camera, caught mid-laugh, veil lifting slightly in the breeze. On the back of that one, in handwriting I recognized instantly, was a single line. What a waste. No name, no return address, just venom in cursive. I stared at it for a long time. Then I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat at the table. Dan walked in a minute later, saw the envelope, and froze. I held up the photo. "Did you know about this?" His pause was long enough to answer. I stood slowly, grabbed the entire envelope, and placed it on the counter next to the fridge, next to the grocery list, the unpaid water bill, and the fridge magnets with places we said we'd visit together. "I want you to tell them," I said, "that if anything else like this shows up here, I'll file a harassment report." Dan looked stunned. "You'd really do that? To my family?" I stared at him dead in the eyes. "No, I'd do it for me." Dan didn't sleep at home that night. He didn't say he was leaving, didn't pack a bag. He just stepped outside after dinner to get some air, and never came back. I found out where he was through a tagged photo on Darla's story. Dan on her couch, drink in hand, their mother in the background holding a bowl of popcorn like they were having some cozy movie night. They looked fine. No storm, no chaos. No sign that someone had just mailed his wife a threat in calligraphy. I didn't cry. Instead, I changed the locks. A locksmith came the next morning. I told him it was a routine change. I signed the receipt, tipped too much, and sat on the floor afterward, staring at the new deadbolt. It clicked cleaner than the old one. Sharper, like it meant something. By noon, my inbox was full. A message from Dan. "You're escalating." One from his mom. "This is what happens when people isolate themselves. We're trying to help you grow." And one from an unknown number. "You married into this family. You don't get to undeclare that." I took screenshots of everything, saved them in a new folder on my desktop labeled Proof. I didn't know what I was planning. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. That evening, I took the dress out. Not to give it away. Not to burn it in some melodramatic gesture. I just needed to look at it. To remind myself what I'd chosen. Who I was when I said yes. The fabric still held the shape of that day. The curves and folds. The small makeup stain near the collar I hadn't dared try to clean. My mother had kissed me right before the ceremony and smudged her lipstick on the lace. I'd meant to fix it, but then I didn't. I left it, like a signature. I stood there in the bedroom, alone, holding it in front of me. Not like armor anymore, but like a memory of a moment no one else had earned. That night I wrote a new message. This one to Darla directly. "Keep your vow renewal. Buy your own dress. And tell your family this. My boundaries aren't requests. They're facts." I paused before hitting send. Then I typed one more line. "Also, if you ever involve my wedding photos again, I will treat it like the harassment it is. And I won't just warn you." I hit send, blocked her. Then, for the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. Dan came back 2 days later, like nothing had happened. He knocked. Didn't use his key, because it no longer worked. I opened the door and stood there in the threshold, not moving aside. He held a paper grocery bag like it was some kind of peace offering. "I brought your favorite tea," he said. "Chamomile with the honey you like." I stared at the bag. "You don't live here right now." His mouth opened, then closed, like he wanted to protest but couldn't find the language. "I just want to talk. You've had weeks." I didn't know it would get this far. "It didn't get this far," I said. "You let it." I could see the shift in his face then. The realization that the version of me he was hoping to come home to, the one who apologized first, smoothed things over and made it easier for him, wasn't here. Not anymore. "I didn't send that envelope," he said. I nodded. "I know." That surprised him. "But you knew about it," I continued. "You knew before I showed it to you. You recognized the writing, and you did nothing." He rubbed his jaw, eyes darting past me into the living room like he was trying to place himself back into it. "They think you're overreacting." I laughed softly. "And what do you think?" He hesitated. I think you're making this too black and white." I stepped forward, closing the space between us. "Because it is black and white." I said no. They didn't care. I enforced that no. They retaliated. That's not family. That's control. Dan looked tired. Not just physically, but like someone who realized they were being written out of a story they thought they were still starring in. He shifted the grocery bag in his hands. "Look, I don't agree with how they handled it, but they're family. You can't just cut them off." I didn't. I said. They pushed me out and then acted shocked I didn't thank them for it. He leaned against the doorframe. So what? You want a divorce over this? It was the first time he'd said the word, divorce, like a test balloon to see how I'd react. I let it float. I want a partner, I said. I want someone who doesn't need a debate every time I draw a line, who doesn't hand my dignity to other people to keep the peace. Dan sighed, that long, slow kind of sigh people do when they finally understand something they don't like. You're serious about this, he said. I nodded. More than I've ever been about anything. There was a long silence, the kind that doesn't heal anything, just confirms what's already broken. He looked down, then up at me, and for a second I thought he might cry. But he didn't. He just set the bag down gently on the porch like he was leaving a peace treaty that had already expired. I didn't thank him. Finally, I stepped back and gently closed the door. He didn't knock again, and I didn't wait for the sound of footsteps leaving. I just stood there, hand on the doorknob, heartbeat steady. It was quiet, not empty, just finally, mercifully, mine. The tea sat untouched on the porch for 3 days. I left it there on purpose, watched it through the window like a monument to everything that didn't work. It wilted in the sun, the paper bag darkening at the base from condensation. On the 3rd day, I picked it up, poured the honey down the drain, and tossed the rest in the bin without a second thought. It felt symbolic, like deleting a voicemail you never listened to. Dan didn't come back, but his absence wasn't empty. It was noisy with aftershocks. His mother started texting again, paragraphs, then voice messages. Some stern, some tearful, all variations of the same plea. This family is breaking because of your stubbornness. Can't you see that? I didn't reply. Instead, I archived the messages into my growing folder. Proof, now with subfolders. Texts, calls, voicemails, enablers, patterns. It wasn't about collecting ammunition. It was about clarity. Every screenshot reminded me I wasn't imagining this. Then came the package. Another envelope. Larger this time. Bubble wrapped. I opened it on the kitchen table with scissors and gloves like it might explode. Inside, a blank white dress. Not mine. A knockoff. Cheap material. Wrinkled from shipping. No note. Just a typed receipt from a local bridal boutique. Purchased under the family fund. That name. That passive-aggressive label of unity. As if a group of adults had pooled money to buy back my compliance. As if their effort to replace what they tried to take could undo what they broke. I put the dress back in the bag, zipped it, and walked it straight to the dumpster outside. I didn't flinch. I didn't second guess. I just lifted the lid and let it fall in like dead weight. The lid slammed down like punctuation. Afterward, I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the real dress, holding it tighter than I expected. I didn't cry. Not then. I just held it like it knew more about who I was than anyone else did. My mom's lipstick stain still clung to the neckline like a fingerprint from another life. I traced it with my thumb. Later that night, Dan texted, "Can we at least meet and talk like adults? One-on-one, no family." I stared at the message for a long time. Typed, "Only if we meet at my terms. No justifications, no defending them." He replied, "Okay, tomorrow?" We met at a coffee shop downtown. Neutral ground. Public, bright, impossible to yell in. He looked smaller than I remembered, like a version of himself that didn't quite finish loading. "I miss you," he said. I nodded. "I miss what I thought we were." He winced. "They didn't mean to hurt you." "Yes," I said. "They did. Maybe not in the way you define it, but in every way that counts." He looked down, fiddling with his cup. "You really won't let this go, will you?" "I already let you go," I said. "You just haven't noticed yet." We sat in silence. Then I stood, placed my coffee down, and said one final thing before I left. "You're not the man who held my hand when I bought that dress. And I'm not the woman who thought love was enough to make people respect me." When I walked out, the sun hit my face like a verdict, and for once, it didn't burn. The day after the coffee shop, I woke up without dread in my chest for the first time in weeks. It wasn't peace exactly, but it was the absence of begging, of hoping someone would wake up and realize they'd hurt me. That absence felt almost luxurious. I went through my morning slowly, made breakfast, opened the windows, watered my plants. I hadn't realized how much of my life had been lived on mute, like I was shrinking myself to fit inside someone else's idea of keeping the peace. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A message from Dan's sister-in-law, the only one in his family who'd never said much during the storm. We'd exchanged pleasantries at holidays, shared dessert recipes once. The message just said, "If you ever need a witness, I'm here." I saw what they did, all of it. I stared at it for a long time, not because I doubted her, but because that small, unexpected gesture of solidarity nearly broke me open. I typed a short thank you and hit send before I could overthink it. 2 hours later, I received a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. Then came a voicemail. Dan's voice, quiet, almost hoarse. "I signed the lease on a new place. I'll have my things out by the end of the week. I won't bother you anymore. I'm sorry." He didn't ask for forgiveness, didn't plead, just let go. I sat down on the floor with my back against the kitchen counter. Everything was still. There was no dramatic music, no movie-ending monologue, just me, a fridge humming softly, and sunlight stretching across the tile. That evening, I opened the closet again. The dress was still there, still untouched, still mine. But this time, I didn't reach for it. I didn't need to hold it to remind myself of what I'd protected. I just looked at it and whispered, "Thank you." Then I turned off the closet light and closed the door. Dan's things were gone by Friday. He didn't leave a note. Just a hollow drawer in the dresser, a dent in the couch cushion where he always sat, and a lone pair of socks he must have missed under the bed. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I picked up the socks, tossed them in the trash, and vacuumed the space he used to occupy. It was startling how quickly the house adjusted to his absence, like it had been waiting. The silence was different now. Not tense, not lonely, just quiet in the way soft linen is quiet, calm, intentional, mine. I changed the sheets that night, made the bed the way I like it, slept in the middle. In the days that followed, I started reclaiming the house, room by room, rearranged the furniture, put away the framed photos of his family, opened the windows wider. I scrubbed baseboards, reorganized shelves, even bought a new lamp for the guest room, now officially my reading room. Each small change felt like a stitch pulled tight, a mending, a map back to myself. The group chat went inactive. Maybe someone finally took the hint. Or maybe there was just nothing left to say once the scapegoat refused to show up for the ceremony. The vow renewal happened anyway. I saw photos online. Someone forgot to block me. Darla in a secondhand dress that looked suspiciously like the one they mailed me. Her smile was strained, and Dan wasn't in any of the group pictures, just his mother, 2 aunts, and a sea of familiar faces pretending nothing had happened. They looked exactly like what they were, a curated version of the truth, filtered and framed. I closed the app and deleted the screenshot I hadn't realized I'd taken. I didn't need evidence anymore. I had closure. A few days later, while cleaning out the closet, I found the wedding photo again, the one of me alone on the balcony, veil lifting, that half laugh frozen in time. I didn't cry when I saw it. I smiled. Because for the first time, I finally understood what she was laughing at. The absurdity of giving yourself away for the sake of people who only wanted to hollow you out. I took the photo, framed it, and placed it on my desk. That woman was still here, still standing, still sacred. The dress stayed in the closet. Not as a wound, as proof. Proof that I said no, and meant it.